the Nephilim game might actually be a real thing, and that's been something that's been on my mind since the previews, because it does look like this game called 58 Holes, or Hounds and Jackals. Now, the game of 58 Holes, or Hounds and Jackals, originally was thought to come from Egypt. Some of the best examples come from there, but there are also early examples found in the Bronze Age, and so it seems to have spread across much of the Middle East, Egypt being a major influence, of course, in the region. And you have some examples here on the bottom right, these patterns for these boards and variations between them. And you'll notice the way the holes are, they resemble the mysterious language, the Great Circle, the Adamic language, which also uses little holes and similar curved designs in order to make out different words, which is a very odd feature, right, using little holes. And that seems to relate back to their in-universe version, the Nephilim game. So here's a side-by-side comparison. You can see the difference, or the similarities between the two as well. And if we look at the pieces themselves, they look like reduced, simplified versions of the same kinds of pieces. The stone pieces that we see, which also seem to be a representation of the kind of stone relics that we find, the elongated stone relics that we find in different locations that people have made jokes about based off what they look like, but we get a more formalized version of that when we reach the hidden pyramid in Sukhothai. Right? And so we can see the snouts of the hounds, the snouts of the jackals. They resemble just very, chonky versions of the same thing. And I think in one of the scenes towards the end of this hidden pyramid section, that you actually have two facing together that Gina mentions, they look like they're kissing. So there's a bit of zoomorphism to it too.
Now, some people have compared them to certain disembodied members, especially the ones you find out in the wild there, and that may be the case, because but not so much directly based off of that item. There are such objects in archaeological context, but also another connection is when you're in the game area, the hidden pyramid area, and you put these rounded stones as opposed to just the kind of T-shaped stones that rotate, and they kind of look like Shivalinga. They look like the inspiration for what the Sankara stones are. And here's a diagram of what they are at Khmer temples. Right, a huge influence from Hinduism before many of these temples became Buddhist.
To connect it more to the Great Circle even, the Hounds and Jackals boards have been found at Ur. Ur is better known for another game, the Royal Game of Ur, but there's actually Hounds and Jackals being played here at this site too. And so here's another element of how widely distributed this game is. You have everything from in Egypt, in Thebes, all the way up to modern-day Turkey, so Anatolia, and all the way east into Mesopotamia, into Babylon, into Assyria, and of course into the Holy Land in the center as well of this map. So yeah, this is a very widely played game. It does make sense if you were going to base something off of an early game that spread throughout the world, or throughout much of it, as a sort of Adamic language based proto game. This would be one option, and certainly would only really compare with a few other games like the Royal Game of Ur, or another game called the Game of 20 Squares, which is very similar to the Royal Game of Ur. Here's just a comparison between the two, between the Game of Ur and the Hounds and Jackals game. And so with the Royal Game of Ur, you're actually starting at the larger end. So you have 4 squares on your side, and the opposite side of the central column, you have another 4 squares for your opponent. So you basically put pieces on your side, and you try to move them down the middle bridging column until you circle around the ends where you have 2 squares to exit from. So you're trying to get all of your pieces out faster than the other opponent. Similarly, Hounds and Jackals, the goal is to get to the end with all your animal pieces. And just if you ever want to read an exhaustive study of the expansion of this game, there was a recent paper that came out in the Journal of Archaeological Sciences that's about the cultural transmission of these two games, and which is also where I found out that Ur also has an example of it. For this game, it seems that it's the foundation for a lot of things. A lot of these stone pieces that you insert in the game board, the goal is to create these patterns of these different words, and that's something you see in that doorway that blocks the entrance to the secret location for the secret ending. That you do have to put your ancient relics into these different holes in order to fill all the gaps and turn them so they're all filled up and all the words are shown, and the door automatically opens. So to compare the two, it's the Nephilim game. It's really hard to say because the games are puzzles in the video game, right? Either to open doors or open doors on the sides of walls, or to play that game in the Hidden Pyramid. And but it seems that it's based off of patterns of creating the names themselves, right? It's always associated with whatever Adamic word that you're looking for. So perhaps it's the actual game, hypothetically, not these puzzles, the actual game that it is based off of in the universe is some sort of game where you're trying to create the name faster than the other person, perhaps. In real life, the Hounds and Jackals version, again, is based off of racing from one end to another with 5 sticks per person. And you might use dice or die or stick die. So different patterns refer to different numbers. So I'm just using an example of stick dice from the Egyptian game of Senate, which is also featured briefly in the Giza village of the Giza level. And there's one more element that I find very interesting in that it relates to Noah's Ark, or why this game was chosen by the developers. I think on the one hand, maybe it's because they wanted to make sure that they had a game that was more unique, that wasn't as familiar, because let's say you had chess, or you had Royal Game of Ur, you had Senate, some people would identify that more easily, maybe comment on its actual ages, whereas this one's a more obscure game today. At the same time, it's very clear that the designers really did a lot of research on board games in their search for puzzles, because you do see chessboards with chess problems, chess puzzles on it. I did a video on that. There's also Maya, I'm not pronouncing it correctly probably, the Thai checkers type game in Sukhothai, and you have Senate in the Giza level. And there's like Briscola, which is also mentioned in the Vatican level as well. So whoever was developing it was really into board games and card games and things like that. And yeah, they probably chose this, potentially, long story short, to TLDR, possibly because it relates to domesticated wild animals. And I know this sounds kind of silly, but if you think about it, right, what is the key MacGuffin of all of this? What are all these sanctuaries protecting? What are the Nephilim protecting? And that is the Ark and all the different stones. And what was the Ark? Was the stones? What did Noah do? Noah, in this universe in particular, he went to different locations to collect animals in order to repopulate the earth afterwards. What would collecting animals be like? He'd collect wild animals and he'd collect domesticated animals, right? And Hounds and Jackals reflect that dualistic dynamic. Anyways, that's about it for today. I'll see you next time, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will continue making some more.